Welcome back to From the Bookshelf for another book club episode. We will be once again looking at Vampire Academy, the first book in the series of the same name by Rochelle Mead. Today we'll be going through chapters 4 and 5. Before we get started, don't forget to like and comment on this video, as well as subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other book club episodes or weekly downloads on Saturday and anything else going on the channel. So let's get started with chapter 4. We're going to be starting on page 44. Okay, so leading into this section, we see Lissa needing what is called a feeder, is basically because she's a vampire, so she does need blood. She eats regular food as well, but she needs blood as well as that. So here she is going to the feeders and recognizing Lissa, her smile grew. "Welcome back, princess." So in this we see that the feeder recognizes Lissa and she, is someone that she used to know. However, from what I understand, the way that the feeders work is that they only stay there as a feeder for like a couple of years, like a year or two, because vampire bites are highly addictive, and it's almost like a drug in that sense. So the fact that she's still there after they've been away for nearly 2 years, or even for a year, is interesting, because clearly she knows enough about Lissa to remember her, so she probably was there for a year or more beforehand. So if they have this time limit on how long a feeder can be there, why would one still be there after knowing her previously, the time they were gone, and then being back? So just something to think about. Let's move to page 45. So in this next part, we see the way that the more I feel about their feeders and the people that give them the blood that they literally need to survive. The Moroi and Guardians looked down on this dependency, that of the addictive bite, even though the Moroi couldn't have survived otherwise unless they took the victims by force. Hypocrisy at its finest. And Rose is right. It is hypocrisy at its finest. Like, they literally see these feeders getting addicted to the vampire bite as like looking down on it and thinking it's something horrible. But without them and what they gave to you, you wouldn't be able to survive unless you literally forced somebody into that situation. And they're always talking about how the Strigoi are evil because they've many reasons, but one of being which that they force themselves on humans to get the blood to live. And the Moroi are basically like, we don't do that. We only take willing people. But then they look down on them like they're second class or second rate or something less than them. And it's hypocrisy, because they literally are dependent on them, but they're looking down on their dependency to them. Let's move on to page 46. So Rose and Melissa are looking at their schedules for the school year, and they basically don't have really very many classes together. And Rose says, "Nerd," I said, "if you were in stupid math like me, we'd have the same afternoon schedule." And I feel like math is a slightly kind of pointless subject for vampires, especially since the majority of them stick to like their own communities and their own worlds, and they don't really mingle much with the human world in general. I know that some do, and they go to human colleges and stuff like that, and I think later in the series Lissa does it well. But depending on your major in colleges, a lot of them don't even really need math all that much. So I feel like them taking like calculus and all, and higher maths like that really doesn't seem like important. And yet I feel like it's only put in there because they're teenagers in high school, and teenagers in high school need to learn math. But that's just my opinion on that. Let's move to page 51. So in this section, Rose is talking about the way Moroi boys look at Dampier girls like they're something, like they're, you know, they're special. They're not like all the other Moroi girls. She says, I knew I was pretty, but to Moroi boys, my body was more than just pretty. It was sexy in a risque way. Dampiers were an exotic conquest, a novelty all Moroi guys wanted to try. And so I get this concept. I really do, because it's like the Morois have to be with other Morois to have Moroi children. If they're with Dampiers or humans, it's a Dampier child, right? So that's like they're a novelty. There's something special. And they are. I'm not saying that they're not, but just this idea that the Dampiers are there all the time, literally. They're a part of their society. They're in their society just as much as the Moroi are. So, why are they such a novelty? Why are they something that's so special and unique when they're literally one half of their cultural society? It just seems like it wouldn't be such a novelty if they've been around for so long, but yet here we are seeing that they kind of are, and it's slightly a bit of a disconnect. Let's move to page 55. So, Lissa and Rose are talking about the life they used to live before they left, how they went to all these parties. Like, Lissa was a royal, and she had to, like, live up to that after her brother died, because she was, like, inheriting her family's royal title, and they had to go to all these parties and do, like, basically schmoozing with the other royal kids, basically teenage politics. So to be perfectly honest, I didn't want any of that. Talking about the parties and the political stuff. I wanted to go to all the royal parties and wild drunken festivities like we'd always done. So basically she's saying she doesn't want a part of that, but she wants to be a part of that. It's basically a contradiction. Like, I think I understand what she's trying to say. She doesn't want to be a part of, like, the politics and the inner workings of royal society, but she wants to go to the fun stuff, the parties, the festivities, all of that fun, wild, crazy stuff, right? But you can't really have one without the other. As we'll see, they're very interconnected. Like, you can't have the politics without the parties. So she's basically saying, I didn't want the politics, I just want the parties. But the parties are kind of the politics. So it's like one or the other. You can't really have one or the other. It's both. If you don't want one, you can't have the other, and it's just a bit of a contradiction. Let's move to page 58. So we're kind of discussing how the Moroi and the Strigoi are, like the differences and stuff between them. So first we have that, let me just read it, it's a little bit, and Moroi were alive, Strigoi were undead. Moroi were mortal, Strigoi were immortal. Moroi were born, Strigoi were made. And there were two ways to make a Strigoi. Strigoi could forcibly turn humans, Dampiers, or Moroi with a single bite. Moroi, tempted by the promise of immortality, could become Strigoi by choice if they purposely killed another person while feeding. Doing that was considered dark and twisted, the greatest of all sins, both against the Moroi way of life and nature itself. Moroi who chose the dark path lost their ability to connect with elemental magic and other powers of the world. That was why they could no longer go into the sun. I find this a really interesting kind of take on vampires, like the way it works. Like this idea that, we have living vampires. Like, they were born vampires. They've always been a vampire. They weren't changed, turned into one. Nobody else can be like them. Dampiers can't be turned into them. Humans can't be turned into them. Like, the Moroi are born vampires. That's who they are. And then the idea that anybody can become one of the undead vampires, the Strigoi, that they can be turned into them, that they can turn themselves into one. Or I guess Moroi can turn themselves into one. Everyone else has to be turned in that sense. But it's just kind of an interesting, different, little bit of a take on it. You don't really see that too much in vampire books and stories. The idea that they are alive and born that way, and that they can become a different version of themselves or different version of the vampire. And it's kind of a cool take on it, and I really like that. Let's move on to chapter 5 and page 59. So in this, we're kind of taking a look at Christian Ozera, who is one of the Moroi. His parents had chosen to become Strigoi and, you know, were killed. So now he has to live with the stigma of that, and he's being, like, ostracized by his peers, even though he's technically a royal, just like Lissa. But because of what his parents did and what happened to them, he is considered kind of outside of that, an outcast. If rumors were true, Christian had witnessed it all when he was very young. That is, with what happened with his parents. And although he wasn't Strigoi himself, some people thought he wasn't far off, with the way he always wore black and kept to himself. Strigoi or not, I didn't trust him. He was a jerk, and I silently screamed at Lissa to get out of there, and not that my screaming did much good. So, in this, we kind of see the judgmental Rose come out, and a lot of judgmental Rose has to do with Christian, and we will see a lot of that in this book. But she's basically saying, well, if what rumors say, if what, you know, these royal kids gossiping say, he's practically a Strigoi himself. He keeps to himself. He doesn't talk to anybody. Do you think he doesn't talk to anybody because he doesn't want to, or because you're judging him? Like, you're literally over here looking at him like he's the scum of the earth, and you expect him to just come over and make friends? Like, of course he doesn't want to talk to you. You're basically making him feel terrible. Like there's something wrong with him. And why would he want to be friends with someone if they think there's something wrong with him? And he's not, you know what I mean? If that makes sense. And then Rose goes on to say she doesn't trust him. She doesn't trust him, and she wants to get Lissa away from him. She doesn't know him. At this point, I don't think she's really talked to him yet. She's just decided that based on what the kids gossiping about him says and what happened with his parents, automatically chooses not to trust him, not to like him, not to give him a chance, which is exactly what Kurova, the headmistress, and a lot of the kids are doing to her and Lissa. So it's like, you don't want people treating you this way based on something they don't understand, but you're automatically treating Christian this way based on really something you don't understand. You know nothing about Christian. You don't care to know about anything about Christian, and yet you're judging him based on things that aren't reality, that aren't the truth about him. And it's one of the character flaws of Rose. I mean, every character needs a flaw, right? It doesn't make them a bad character. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that character is the way it's written. It actually makes them more well-rounded of a character, having a character flaw. And I think that's Rose's, that she's quick to jump to judgment, and just quick to jump to anything, really. She doesn't really stop to consider the situation, to consider the person. She just kind of like jumps into something. She decides what something is, and doesn't let herself consider anything else. She doesn't let herself consider that Christian might be a nice person, that he could be somebody that would be an ally for her and Rose, and she doesn't really care. Or not for her and Rose, she is Rose. For her and Lissa, still doesn't care though. What page is this? Okay, page 62. In this next part, we see kind of this idea that for Dhampirs to give blood to Moroi is seen as wrong or dirty or something to be looked down on. We accepted that as part of life, but still look down on them for it. Look down on them as in the Dhampirs that did it. For anyone else, especially a Dhampir, letting a Moroi take blood from you was almost, well, dirty. In fact, one of the kinkiest, particularly, I won't say that word, but like terrible things a Dhampir could do was let a Moroi drink blood during, yeah, right? So basically what she's saying is it's horrible, sleazy, and like the worst thing a Dampier could do is to let a Moroi drink blood from them. And the thing I find strange is this concept is literally, I've only ever seen it in this book. I read a lot of vampire novels, a lot. And I don't think I've ever come across one before that says it like this, that there's something wrong with that's weird, or that's bad, where it's terrible. Literally every other one I've seen doesn't really address it, or it's the opposite. It's seen as something people do because it's more, I guess, romantic. I don't really know the word to describe that, but you know what I mean? Like if you look at like True Blood or Anita Blake books and that kind of thing, like it's quite the opposite. And it's just weird that this is the only book series where I've seen it kind of looked down on like that. But I guess it just makes for an interesting kind of plot device, or not really a plot device, but more of an interesting kind of direction for the plot to go at points. Let's move to page 64. So Christian Ozera had just invited her to hang out with him. Not good. They were coasting through the middle, and then there was coasting through. Okay, so Christian Ozera had just invited her to hang out with him. Not good. There was coasting through the middle, and then there was turning to the dark side. But the feelings humming through our bond were no longer scared or upset. She was almost content, though still a little nervous. She's not in danger, I finally said. I hoped. So, there's a couple things going on here. One is Judgmental Rose is back very quickly. So she wants Lissa to be happy, and she feels that Lissa is content and she's enjoying herself, and that she actually feels some sort of happiness that she probably hasn't felt since coming back to this school. But in Rose's mind, she's like, well, she should be happy. She deserves to be happy. But Christian can't be involved. Like, we got to get rid of him. He's evil. He's like about to be turned Strigoi. He's pretty much a bad guy no matter what. And in this way of thinking, like, she wants Lissa to be happy, but as long as it doesn't involve someone, this one particular person, like, but what if this one particular person is the one person that'll make her happy? Would you still want her to not be with him because you don't approve? Because you're judging him unfairly? I think this is kind of to a point where Rose is letting her feelings towards someone or judgment towards someone affect how she it's affecting her judgment, in the sense that she's not allowing Lissa to make her own decisions. She wants to control the situation, and we'll see in a future episode the lengths she's willing to go to make sure she does control that. She is capable of controlling that, because if Rose can't control the situation, she doesn't want to be a part of it. She has to control the situation, or it's just gonna blow up, because she doesn't understand what's going on and what's happening, and she can't control what's happening. I think she kind of starts to spiral, and we see that later on. Let's move to page 67. So Rose and Dimitri are talking about the Psyhounds again, and about kind of the stuff that the school have used to try and find them. So Rose says, well, it was a hell of a lot better than the last one they tried. Last one? Yeah, in Chicago with the pack of Psyhounds. This is the first time we found you in Portland. I sat up from my stretches and crossed my legs. I don't think I imagined Psyhounds. Who else could have sent them? They only answered to Moroi. Maybe no one told you about it. Maybe, he said dismissively. So what we see here is Rose telling Dimitri that they had tried to capture her more than once, and him saying, no, this is the first time that we found you, was when we found you. And she's like, no, the Psyhounds, obviously you sent them. And it seems kind of a weird thing that she would believe he's making up. Like, yeah, the school might not have told him. Yeah, the school might not have told him, but it seems kind of unlikely that they wouldn't have, seeing as how he's heading up the search, or he was heading up the search for them. Why wouldn't they tell them? Tell him about it? But she's like, well, I didn't imagine them. He never said that you imagined them, just that he didn't send them. So I think the question here is, if Rose didn't imagine them, which I don't think she did, and Demetria didn't send them, then who did? Because she says specifically that only the Moroi controlled them. So who sent them? If not the school, is there someone else after Rose and Lissa? Something to keep in mind. I mean, if you've read the book, you know, but if not, let's move to page 68. So Rose is in her room, her dorm room, and she says, my few belongings had been spirited out of Portland and now sat in boxes around the room. I rummaged through them, pulling out a t-shirt to sleep in. I found a couple of pictures as I did. One of Lissa and me at a football game in Portland, and another taken when I'd gone on vacation with her family a year before the accident. So we see this where we see this here, that the Dampiers who captured them actually took the time to go back to the house and basically collect all their things, which I find a little strange. Like, why take the time? I guess it's not so much strange as like, it seems odd that they would take the time to go and collect all of their stuff, like clothes and pictures and things like that. Like, they literally went out of their way, instead of just taking them back to the school, they went out of their way to go back to that house and gather up their things to bring along. And I found that a little interesting, because, I mean, the way that Rose rushed them out of there, it seems unlikely that she was able to collect all of those things at that time, unless they were like in suitcases, which I don't think they were. So a lot of these things, like the pictures and things like that, it seems unlikely that she would have grabbed them in the heat of the moment, because, like I said, Rose doesn't really think before she acts. So that means somebody would have had to go back to get them. And I find it kind of interesting that they would do that, despite, I'm not really sure despite what. So it just seems interesting that that was a choice that they made, unless it was Demetria that made the choice. And then I wouldn't be surprised, because he's like literally one of the most considerate people in these books. Like, literally thinks about everyone before himself. Let's move to page 70. So here we have Rose talking to Lissa about Christian. So Rose is kind of trying to get Lissa away from this idea of being with Christian. And I'm talking about her old boyfriend, Aaron, who's dating a new girl who's crazy. Mia, crazy. But that's not really the point here. So, you know, Lissa didn't really like Aaron too much. Like, she liked him, but not like that. And Rose says, fine, I let my teasing go. Let Aaron stay in the nursery school. Just so as long as you stay away from Christian. He's dangerous. You're overreacting. He's not going to Strigoi. He's a bad influence. She laughed. You think I'm in danger of going to Strigoi? So Rose here specifically says that she thinks Christian is a bad influence and that she should stay away from him. And my first question is, what exactly is he a bad influence of? Like, what is he doing that is such a bad influence for her? He doesn't seem to be really doing anything like weird or evil. He's just kind of like sitting and talking with her, and the two of them having conversations and enjoying each other's company. And it's like, why is that so bad? It's just, once again, like I said, Rose being very overly judgmental, and not stopping to actually get to knowing him not actually stopping to get to know him. Because if she did, she'd realize that he's a really good guy. But that's Rose for you. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is on the next page, on 71. So we see this last part. It's basically Rose and some of the other kids are talking about something that happened before she left with a gerbil. And let me just read real quick. They're talking about... Okay, so I cocked my head toward him, giving him a playful smile. I started a lot of fights in her class. The one with the hermit crab and the gerbil. I laughed, recalling it. Oh yeah, it was a hamster, I think. I just dropped it into the crab tank, and they were both worked up from being so close to me, so they went at it. Paul, a guy sitting nearby, whom I didn't really know, chuckled too. So... my whole issue with this thing is, why is this funny? Everybody's laughing like it's the funniest thing in the world. Like, so we've already established that her being around animals, like, disturbs them. They don't like it. It makes them uncomfortable. So she takes a hamster and puts it in a tank with a hermit crab. And they start fighting because they're all upset about being near Rose. But it's like, this is so funny. Like, two animals fighting each other is funny. Like, she's basically just like, I don't know, doing something mean to animals that had nothing to do with anything. And she's just like, oh, it's so funny, and everyone thinks it's so funny. I'm like, it's not funny, it's just mean and a little bit cruel. Like, just because they're animals, like a hamster and I think it's hermit crab, like, so it's fun to just be mean to them and to hurt them. You find that fun or funny? I don't know. It just seems like a weird thing to laugh about and make fun of. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. I mean, did you think that was funny? Would you find... I guess the real question is, would you have found that funny if you'd been in that situation and that happened? Would you find that funny? I know I wouldn't, but that's just me. That's it for today. And this episode, we will jump back in our next one. If you have any thoughts, comments, things you agreed with, disagreed with, or something I might have missed, go ahead and leave them down in the comment section below. I'd love to see what you have to say. And if you have any recommendations on books I should read or that I should do on the channel in the future, go ahead and leave those down in the comments as well. And I'd love to take a look. But until next time.